Hello. In my earlier reporting this evening, I spoke about the attack on the Kerch Bridge. There's been an update in the last hour or so indicating what may have been the source of the attack. Initial reporting seemed to indicate that it may have been missile strikes upon the bridge, which seemed to make sense given the location of the Kerch Bridge, its distance from the areas actively controlled by Ukraine. However, subsequent reporting indicates that the attack on the bridge may have been carried out by a submersible drone. So a submersible or semi-submersible autonomous drone ship or craft capable of travelling underwater and also manoeuvring on the surface. This is what is currently being considered as the most likely vector for the attack on the bridge, and that it may have been carrying a warhead of up to 500 kilograms on it. There has been questions or allegations that it was coordinated by the Ukrainian Navy and the GRU, the intelligence service. I have seen additional theories being thrown out at the moment that the British intelligence and the American intelligence may also have played a hand in this. Reporting is that there was an MQ9 Reaper drone, American reconnaissance and attack drone, in the sky over the Black Sea at the time. This is not uncommon. The Americans have had their reconnaissance drones in the Black Sea throughout this conflict. There was actually, a while ago, there was one of them was downed where it collided with a Russian MiG fighter. And so it's quite possible that that drone was there providing information on the attack or helping to coordinate it. This is also likely as there was a drone attack just yesterday, only 250 kilometres to the west of the Kerch Bridge, at the entrance to the Sevastopol naval base, the Russian naval base on the southern tip of Crimea. In that attack, there were 7 reported drones used in the attack, 2 surface drones or boat drones, which were shown with some footage to have been destroyed via machine gun fire from the port, and 5 other drones, which the assumption is they're aerial drones. These were reportedly disabled via electronic warfare means. So in those cases, powerful electronic generation devices are able to push up strong electromagnetic fields into the air directed at the approaching drones in such a way as to disrupt their command and control and navigation systems and effectively render them unable to reach their targets. The bridge itself, reporting is that there are 2 strands to the bridge, 2 parallel spans. One is for car vehicle traffic, one is for trains. The one which carries the cars has been damaged. There's substantial damage to one of the spans, which will no doubt put that out of operation for some period of time. The other side of the bridge is one dedicated to carrying trains, and that has reopened. Wasn't damaged in this attack, it seems. The Simferopol to Moscow train was reported as heading off just a few hours ago. So what will the response be? It's an interesting question. After last year's attack on the Kerch Bridge, when this alleged Ukrainian truck bomb was detonated on the bridge, causing damage, then the Russians responded within 72 hours with, at that time, one of the largest missile strikes to date, where they fired over, I think, 84 long-range ballistic missiles to targets in Ukraine. So one can imagine that there will probably be some sort of a similar retaliation emanating from Russian-controlled areas in Russia over the coming days. But I guess we'll wait to see what happens there. However, unless things happen very, very quickly, the grain deal, the Black Sea grain deal, will be over. At the time of publishing this, there is about an hour remaining until the UN will consider the grain deal to have ceased. Reports today indicate that the last grain tanker left an Odessa port, travelling on its way towards the Bosphorus, and no other ones have left. Apparently the Russians needed to provide approvals to any tankers that were going to move through the Black Sea, and the last one of those approvals was provided on the 27th of June, which was to that tanker, which is a grain tanker, which is leaving now. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor in the US, has given an interview, a speech, and he has said that there will be a huge diplomatic cost to Russia if the grain deal isn't extended, and that they are waiting to, they and Turkey and the EU are waiting to hear a response from Russia. As I say, given the time now, there's an hour to go. The Russians may hold out to the last moment and then inform the EU that they are going to extend the deal. However, at this stage, that seems unlikely, particularly given just some of the recent interactions with Turkey, with the release of the Azov prisoners back to Ukraine. I saw reporting today that one of those commanders is now back in the field commanding troops in Ukraine, which was exactly what Putin and the Russian Ministry of Defense didn't want to happen, and which is why they agreed to having them be taken out of the fighting and held in Turkey. So with that happening, with this attack on the Kerch Bridge today, I think it unlikely that grain deal will extend. Speaking of grain deals or grain bans, some of you may be aware that there is an ongoing EU grain ban on grain from Ukraine being sold domestically in a number of EU states. The ban covers Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and Slovakia. Each of these 5 EU states have claimed that their own domestic production of grains becomes unprofitable if they were to accept the Ukrainian grain into their countries. And so a ban has been placed where those countries will not accept Ukrainian grain. They will accept Ukrainian grain into their countries on purposes of transit through those countries to other locations, but the actual supply of that and sale within those states is prohibited. This is the 15th of September is when the ban currently runs to, but in reporting just in the last day or so, those 5 states have indicated that they wish to see the ban extended beyond September the 15th. So you start to get an idea of the complex web of relations between nations in Europe, where you have Poland and Romania, who are eager, it seems, in some respects, to become involved in the conflict directly with boots on the ground with Ukraine. However, on the domestic grain production front and economic front, they won't accept Ukrainian grain into their country to support Ukraine. Interesting web of connections that must make any sort of deal within Europe amongst these nations very difficult to navigate. Just a quick summary on the fighting in Ukraine in the last 24 or so hours. The Russian Ministry of Defense provides a daily update. Now, this is Russian reporting, so take it with the skepticism that you think is warranted. However, they do at least provide on a daily basis an update, a consistent updating format of what has happened in areas on the front. And they do report upon their estimated Ukrainian losses in terms of manpower and equipment. recently there was a revelation made that the Ministry of Defence is able to provide the numbers of manpower losses because they have been able to crack the Ukrainian communications. And I don't know how difficult that may be. I don't know if all Ukrainian communications from the front line are encrypted and secured, or if in the heat of battle, people go out recalling back to their commanders by any means necessary. I don't know. But the Russians claim that they've been able to intercept and read or listen to these reports, and that's how they're able to get these numbers. Their reporting today indicates that if they are true, if they are to be believed, is that the Ukrainian losses of men killed and wounded is still very high. The Ministry of Defence reports that throughout the Donetsk region, 270 soldiers killed and wounded. In the Krasny Liman region, 100 soldiers lost, killed or wounded. These Ukrainian soldiers. They also report upon equipment that's been destroyed, and they report that in the Krasny Liman area, an M-Star-B and a D-30 howitzer were destroyed. In the Zaporozhye region, the enemy losses were up to 260 Ukrainian servicemen, 3 armoured fighting vehicles, 3 motor vehicles, as well as a D-20 and an M-Star-B howitzer. And then in the Kherson direction, here in Kherson, there is fighting going on around the Antonovsky Bridge. So in Kherson City, which has got the Dnieper River running beneath it, and just on the eastern side, or the left-hand side of the Dnieper, there is a bridgehead which the Ukrainians have established over the last month. They've suffered heavy losses in retaining that. We've seen footage of, I think it was an Iskander missile strike on one of the spans of the bridge where the Ukrainians were sheltering beneath that. But still, they've continued to resupply that area with small, fast speedboats. And just to the south of this area, there is an area known as the Islands, where the river runs through, and there are small areas of land separated by the river as it streams through there. These areas are being fought over at the moment, and that's where it seems that these Ukrainian servicemen have most likely been lost. Also, the Ministry of Defence reports that 4 motor vehicles, 3 US manufactured M777 artillery systems, and 1 Katsia self-propelled artillery system were destroyed in the Kherson region. Now, there are reports over the last few days, reports of Russian intelligence, also reports from Ukrainian telegram channels, that an offensive is planned to be mounted by the Ukrainians in the Kherson region. While there is talk of that, and the expectation could be that it could happen at any time soon, it also looks as though the Russians may be planning some sort of an offensive, but north. So it looks like some of the fighting might be moving north. There are indications that in the Chernokov and Sumy regions, which are north of Kharkiv, Chernokov is north of Kiev, even getting up close to the Belarus border, there has been some what you might call softening of the Sumy and Chernokov regions over the last couple of weeks. Missile strikes going into these areas, bombing occurring in these areas, and there's no active fighting there. So some analysts are reporting that this may be a softening up of these areas, perhaps taking out some strategic infrastructure, perhaps ammunition supplies or mustering locations where equipment or men are perhaps being brought together in preparation for advancing by the Ukrainians. Maybe there may be some air defense in those areas which they're taking out. Anyhow, it looks as though that area might be where things will start to heat up with perhaps a Russian offensive. Now, in this area, the Russians would be moving from the Russian border into Ukraine, as in this area, the Russians haven't yet advanced into Ukraine. Unlike the south in the Kherson and Donetsk and Zaporozhye regions, where the fighting is happening on areas of Luhansk and Donetsk regions, which were within Ukraine, the Ukraine borders, as they were at in February 2022. Here, if an advance was to take place, it would be starting within the Russian boundary and moving into Ukraine there. Now, the reason that's being postulated of why this is the area chosen by the Russians is that this area so far hasn't been well defended by Ukraine. There hasn't been fighting in this area yet. They haven't built heavy defensive lines and trenches, and it is perhaps less densely manned and supported by Ukrainians. And the Russians believe that there isn't at this stage large numbers of minefields being developed in this area. And so that's the thinking as to why they may go there. So there's something to watch, I think, over the next few days, and see if there is a push towards those more northern regions by the Russians. If that was to happen, this would then put pressure on Ukraine to defend these areas. Because once Sumy and Chernokov, if those areas are taken, then looking on the map, the next large place to the west is Kiev itself. So any activity by the Russians in this area is likely to draw forces from the south. Now, if they draw forces from the south, if they're bringing them up from the Zaporozhye region, if they're bringing them up from around Avdiivka and Bakhmut, or if they're bringing them from Kherson down in the south, this then weakens the Ukrainian ability to defend those areas. Okay, that's it for tonight. If you've enjoyed this, please subscribe, give me a like on the channel, or tell your friends. I look forward to talking to you again soon.